Dr. James Jeans. The screen is yours. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening. I'd like to thank the organizers, Taylor's University and Zubaidi, for the kind invitation for me to come back and speak about the elections. So what I'll do tonight is really to provide the big picture and raise some questions about these elections so that we can have a discussion, not only among the panelists, but among the audience as well. So I think, like all elections, I think the first starting point is, of course, the actual numbers. Who won, who lost, how many seats that people won. So I think the easiest way of looking at it is actually to look at who the major players are and what sort of seats they capture. So I put together a very simple table that shows who the major players are and how many seats they've won. So with Pakatan Harapan and its allies, they won 82 seats. Perikatan Nasional and its allies won 74 seats. The next block is Barisan Nasional, followed by GPS, GRS, and the final 7 seats were won by either single parties, single MP parties, plus independents. So it comes out to 222. So you can see that there is a big gap between the two big blocks, 82 to 74, a difference of about 6 or 7 seats. And after that, immediately drop to the next block, which is between 30 and 23 seats. So generally, I think if you look at the situation in Peninsular Malaysia after the election, it is quite clear that Party Islam Malaysia PAS, for the very first time since its founding, has broken out of the so-called Malay heartland states. You can see PAS people winning all over Malaya, but it's very interesting that they have won in places that you normally would not associate them with winning. Interestingly also, I think it is quite clear that PAS is on the way up. It is currently the biggest bloc in parliament. They have about 49 MPs, and this constitutes 1/5 of all the parliamentary seats. I think it's also quite true that one of the reasons why PAS did so well with Perikatan Nasional is because they appear to be the biggest beneficiary of the Undi 18 and the auto registration of voters. Early figures I've seen from Kelantan and Terengganu shows that many of the young people who people thought will be more progressive actually voted for conservative Islam. I think in terms of Perikatan Nasional and PAS, I think it's also quite clear that they are the major beneficiary of TikTok videos in terms of social media. So unlike 2018, WhatsApp and Telegram did not play a huge role. It was really TikTok videos. The sort of videos that people receive on WhatsApp and Telegram were actually produced for TikTok. Then they were transferred to WhatsApp and Telegram. And of course, they really benefited from the anti-Zahid vote. I think it's very clear that among the rural Malay population, when they had a chance to vote for UMNO or for Perikatan, they chose Perikatan mainly because they do not want to see Zahid coming back to power. So there was a very strong anti-Zahid vote rather than an anti-UMNO vote. So the outcome is very clear. PAS is now the dominant party among the rural Malays. This is a very important point. People keep forgetting about it. The other important point is that if you look at the map of Peninsular Malaysia, it is quite clear that Malaya is sort of broken up into two parts. The upper part of Malaya is really where PAS is concentrated. So the dividing line is around Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, and Pahang, all the way up to the Thai border. That area is basically PAS area, with the exception of Penang, and anything below that is more well spread out. The other thing that is very clear about the voting outcome in Peninsular Malaysia is that DAP and Pakatan Harapan retain their dominance in the urban area. So places like Klang Valley, Johor, Georgetown, all those areas, it is quite clear that Pakatan Harapan, especially DAP, still dominate the areas. So that's the reason why, interestingly enough, DAP, the second best performer with 40 seats, they only lost 2 seats compared to 42 seats they won in 2018. UMNO, as I mentioned already, they had a terrible results with 30 seats, and this is the worst result since the founding of UMNO. And of course, DAP is now the second largest block after PAS. Now in Sabah and Sarawak, I think the interesting picture is, of course, GPS underperformed in Sarawak. Prior to the elections, almost everybody you spoke to were gung-ho about GPS. The really gung-ho people said that GPS was going to win between 28 and 29 seats. The less gung-ho people said that GPS was really at a minimum looking at 25 seats. Of course, that didn't happen. GPS underperformed. They only won 23 seats. It is also quite clear that in Sarawak, the Chinese backed Pakatan Harapan and DAP in all the urban area. So in Kuching, Sibu, and Miri, you can see that it's basically won by the opposition. In Sabah, the vote was fractured, basically coming out in three ways between Pakatan Harapan, GRS, and Sabah UMNO. Interestingly enough, before the election, there was a lot of thought that Warisan may win up to 7 seats, but again, they underperformed. They came in at 3. Like the Sarawak, outcome, the Chinese also backed mostly the opposition in the urban areas in Sabah. So what do we have now? Now, basically, we have a Pakatan Harapan Plus government. I think it's important to note, and this is actual fact, that they had lots of problems putting a coalition together because no party had a clear majority. So basically, this government is appointed by the Malay rulers. It took them 5 days to sort this out, to select Anwar Ibrahim to head the new government. I think it's very important to reiterate at this point that this is a post-election coalition government. But the good news is that this Pakatan Harapan Plus government is much more multiracial compared to the Perikatan government had they been given the chance by the Malay rulers to set up the federal government. And that's the reason why I think it's very, very difficult for Anwar Ibrahim to shape the government because you can see that he had a lot of problems appointing the ministers, took him a long time. And even today, the deputy ministers list is still not out yet. I think one of the problems with having a post-election coalition government is that because everybody jumping at the very last minute or after the election, it's very difficult to coordinate policies after this. And I think it's really, really important that he really hamper down and get the policies right. Because the lessons we learned from the first Pakatan Harapan, the one that fell apart in 2020, was that they did not really coordinate the policies. Everyone was doing their own thing. So that's the reason why they couldn't hold it together when the government fell apart in 2020. I think the major challenge they face is really the Malay vote is essentially with Perikatan Nasional. Again, this is open knowledge. So the question is, how do you stop the anti-Malay, anti-Islam narrative that is currently being put up by Perikatan Nasional? The reason I raise that is because this was exactly the same narrative put out in 2018 and 2019 by the then opposition, which consists of PAS, Bersatu, and UMNO then. They used this very, very easily understood narrative, anti-Malay, anti-Islam narrative against the first Pakatan Harapan government. And it was very, very successful. It was so successful that even Mahathir thought that Bersatu will be in trouble. So that's the reason why he was trying to create a new coalition government in 2020. Now, of course, this being the first general election since the pandemic, it's really about the economy. The government really must revive the economy. The Malaysian economy is in big, big trouble. People don't realize how severely the economy was impacted by the COVID. But the problem with Malaysia is that it is the politics that drives the economy. So if Anwar Ibrahim doesn't get the politics right, this will hamper his efforts to revive the economy. So remember, I talked about the big picture, biggest block being the PAS block. And PAS basically stands for Ketuhanan Melayu Islam. Again, everyone knows this. So this is the biggest block. But then on the opposite side, totally different from PAS, is the DAP block, second block, 40 seats. What do they stand for? A secular Malaysia. So interestingly enough, you have two separate blocks that are totally different in terms of ideology. On top of that, you also have another block, the Borneo block, which again have very little in common with the DAP or the PAS as well. They want to do their own thing. So the question I think we have to really discuss going forward is that, is there a common area? Is it possible to reconcile these three circles? Because if you look at it really deeply, right, there's really no areas where they have a common understanding. because each of the things that they want from each of these blocks are something that is deemed unacceptable by the other blocks. So in lieu of a conclusion, I think it's quite clear that this GE15, we're seeing the rise of PAS, or political Islam. So the question is that, was this a one-off? Was this really an anti-Zahid vote? Or are we seeing something else happening in the Malay community, which a lot of people have touched on, and that is about the rise of political Islam. And that the rise of political Islam was really planted in the 1990s by PAS, and now we're seeing the results of political Islam. I think one way of looking at this issue is that we will find out whether the vote for PAS is more or less a permanent block. Because if it is a permanent vote, then we have a realignment of Malay votes away from Malay nationalism towards political Islam. And we are likely to get an answer to this issue next year when 6 of the states in Peninsular Malaysia will go for state election. So this is the same group of voters who voted this way in GE15. So we have to find out how they're going to vote next year. If they are going to vote for PAS or Perikatan again, then what we're seeing is a permanent realignment in the Malay vote. I think the other worrying thing is that GE15 has laid bare the political divide between the different races. I mean, most of us knew that there was a political divide, but we didn't know how bad it was. Now it is very, very clear. And also, we can also see that the divide between East and Malaysia are actually getting worse. So basically, my argument is that the outcome of GE15 is the worst possible outcome. I was hoping for something completely different. I was hoping that there'll be one dominant party that will emerge from this election. But the problem is that the dominant party that emerged out of this election is actually PAS. And the reason why I say it's problematic is because PAS want to fundamentally change the character of this country and make this country an Islamic state. I think the other thing that a lot of people have not spoken about is that the GE15 also confirmed that the political instability started in 2020, the one that was triggered off in 2020, is still happening today, and that the current political class that we have in Malaysia doesn't appear to be capable of resolving this political divide or political instability. Okay, so so my presentation basically is asking, where do we go from here? Because it looks very much like the two coalition system that Malaysia has been used to for so many years in the first 60 years. That thing is totally dead. It doesn't work anymore. The other worrying thing about GE15 is that, you know, increasingly we find that in terms of campaigning, in terms of outreach, everything has sort of moved on online. But the problem moving online is that you are creating a space for the social media. Now, social media is good and bad, but in Malaysia, it's all bad because people use it to spread hatred on social media. This is quite unusual because the other country that experienced social media where it really shaped the elections was in the Philippines earlier this year, in May. When the Filipino election, when they elected Marcos, it was quite clear that he was helped. Well, he was really, really helped by TikTok. In Malaysia, TikTok also make a major appearance in this election. But the way TikTok was used in this country was all about identity politics, about hatred for the inner group and the outer group, which I think is a very, very dangerous thing. Thank you very much.